Hi, and thank you for attending this webinar entitled Life in Balance and How to Find Ways to Create Boundaries and Harmony in Your Life. My name is Julia Wilkins from the Health Management Department at Health New England. We're going to talk about why life in balance is important, why it's become such a hot topic, and what we can do to do our best to make sure that we're living a life that's balanced so that in return we can have happiness and success. So we're going to look at the basic word of balance. What do you think that the definition of balance is? I'll let you think about that for a second. Well, if we actually look at Webster's dictionary, balance is basically a condition in which different elements are equal or in the correct proportions. And if we're in the act of balancing, we're offsetting or comparing the value of one thing with another. This may be a little surprising because we often think that balance means that everything is equal. But if you look deeper into this definition, you can see that true balance is also defined as when all elements are in the correct proportions. So it doesn't mean they're all equal, they're just in the correct proportions. If you're in the act of balancing emotionally, mentally, physically, the value of how much goes into one part needs to be determined as well. So today we'll learn that you don't need to get everything equal attention, but you do need to determine the amount of attention you would like to go into each area of your life and how you're going to do so and be successful. So what does life in balance mean? Well, this is the bigger picture of health and well-being. A lot of times we talk about physical activity, we talk about nutrition, we think about what is our cholesterol number. But having life in balance really affects all of these things. Often we hear the term work-life balance, but our world consists more of just work and then the extra life that we have outside of work. There's so much more that determines what we do day to day and what our goals are. And when we don't have balance in these areas of our life, it can cause disturbances in our habits and cause additional issues. It can affect us socially, physically, and mentally. So it's a lot of aspects that it's touching. It can cause lack of sleep, added stress in our lives. It can affect our eating habits. Maybe we won't eat as much, or we are not taking the time to eat healthfully. It affects our relationships if we're not putting in the time or if there's stress related to a relationship. It influences work production, whether you're producing less or more than you're required to do. Exercise if there's no time to do so. And also communication skills. Being out of balance over time can lead also to disease due to the stress of all these things putting on your body. We've learned in other webinars that sleep can really affect your health alone. Imagine all of these things because you're not living a balanced life. So when we say balance, is balance even possible to find? Can we really have that in our lives? Is it realistic? Let's first look at why life in balance is such a hot topic. Why is this even an issue nowadays that we need to talk about? Well, life has changed a lot in the last, let's say, 30 to 50 years, increasing the need to create balance in our lives. We live in what's called a 24/7 society. So especially with the explosion of cell phone usage, tablets, email, we are constantly on demand. We're expected to answer texts right away or emails promptly, and people expect instant gratification, and they expect that instant gratification from us. It may be really tempting to address a work issue or an email that you got while eating dinner with your family. How do you balance the needs of both your family and work? We can also access social media and reality television at any time. And so we're constantly felt with that feeling that we should do more because we see others doing more, that our life isn't being lived to the fullest and that we need to go, go, go. With this unlimited access to people's lives, we're constantly overloaded with information and able to check email or Facebook or whatever we want at even 1 a.m. when you can't fall asleep. All of our habits make up balanced days, and that includes rest. That includes not being always on. And this is more evident today in the rate of how things change. So for example, in the 70s or 80s, we may have seen improvements in a computer over a few years, but now they're changing monthly, maybe even weekly, and new versions of electronics are always coming out, and we're always pushed to be thinking bigger and better. So because of this rapid change, our lives we're forced into this 24-hour, 7 days a week society. But this isn't always necessarily a bad thing. We just need to learn how to set aside time for the things that are important to us. Another common term you might have heard is burnout. And what burnout is when people are overwhelmed and just feel like they can't do it all anymore. It's a psychological term, so it's not a medical condition or a medical disease, but it's a psychological term that refers to long-term exhaustion and diminished interest in work. Whether that work is your job, taking care of your family, or anything along those lines, you have a lack of interest because you just feel very overwhelmed. What burnout is stress and imbalance of priorities. This stress over time can lead to disease like we just talked about, because the physical body can grow to be the result of your mental and emotional health. Your physical body is really the consequence of what's going on internally. So not only are people feeling burnt out, but they're also suffering in silence. They don't reach out. They think they should be able to do everything. And if they can't, then they're lazy, or they're not good enough, or they're not motivated. They see on social media people doing things because people are highlighting the best parts of their lives, and they feel they need to be the same. Studies show that approximately 20% of the people you work with have some sort of mental disorder, such as depression or anxiety, but many of us may not even know that because people won't reach out for help due to embarrassment or feeling less than. We talked about how society has changed to this 24/7 mentality and how quickly we've been forced to adapt to that as our new normal. It's not uncommon to find any of these 4 points happening in your life right now. The plugged-in society allows for constant communication, especially if you're working in corporate America, where that constant communication is with work, and it's very difficult to turn it off for feelings of guilt that you're not doing your job to the fullest, fear that a supervisor might be upset because you're not doing your job, or just wanting to get ahead and getting in those extra hours you feel that will get you ahead. Our bodies were built with this fight or flight response, and years ago we were built with this to flee from physical threats, but now we are using this to fight non-physical threats. We're using it to fight more emotional and mental battles, and this is what is creating mental disease and also health problems where stress comes down the line, obesity, sleep problems, heart disease, and even cancers. An environment that encourages you to be this way is a toxic work environment, and many people can't escape from that. We're working 40 plus hours, and the separation of work and home is really blurring. With being on call, the capability to check email at home, and texting, more than half of American employees don't take lunch break, which is really a symbol of a bigger issue where there's not a lot of work, life, or health balance. Knowing that we live in this culture that we alone can't change, there's a lot of struggles that we might have when we want to be different, if we want to make changes for ourselves. The first struggle is that you must be strong enough to not buy into the culture. You need to be strong enough to be different, strong enough to say no when you need to, which is very hard due to peer pressure, pressures from what people expect from you, and so forth. The second struggle is that you need to accept that you can't control your surroundings, you can't control the demands around you, but you can control how you react. You can control whether you say yes or no, and you have the power to make your own decisions on what steps you want to make to have more of a work-life balance. The third struggle is that you need to accept you will actually never have 100% balance. So this webinar we're talking about life in balance, but it's important to realize that things come up along the way. You have life struggles, there are bumps on the trail. You will never have 100% balance, but working at getting as close as you can is really the key. So all these ways not having balance are affecting our lives. And so what can we do to achieve that balance as much as possible? We might not be able to get there 100%, but what can we do to get there as best as we can? We need to create healthy boundaries. We often feel conflicted between our freedoms and our responsibilities, but healthy boundaries are important for self-care. So healthy boundaries are those things that we set up for ourselves to make sure that we're mentally and emotionally stable. We need space to be ourselves while also maintaining integrity. This can be in areas of work, with family members, friends, anything that you feel you need to build boundaries for, whether it's scaling back or adding to. There are 4 steps to creating healthy boundaries. There's no quick fix. It's really the first step is evaluating what you currently do. Look at your current behavior. There are really 3 broad categories that can describe your type of behavior. There's a passive attitude. This is when you kind of let things slide, but the negative part is that you don't want to get walked all over, so you don't want to be 100% passive. There's also being aggressive, which is on the other side of the spectrum. You want to stand up for yourself, but you really don't want to walk on others either. So that happy medium is being assertive, and this is where you want to be. This is where you're confident and bold, sticking up for yourself, but also thinking of others. Secondly, create guidelines for yourself. Whether this is you saying, I am going to work with my team and my manager to only work till 5 p.m., whatever those guidelines are, wherever you see that you struggle, you can create those for yourself. Remember, again, you want to maintain integrity, so you don't want to be someone who's not pulling their weight, but you also want to remember self-care. You've probably heard that people need to say no. We can't say yes to everything. But creating guidelines, also you want to think about, when do you want to say yes? What are the things that are important to you that saying yes is worth it? Number 3 is to become resilient. So do you bounce back when something knocks you down, or do you stay down? Just like with exercise, you work your physical muscles, you also need to exercise the muscles of your soul, like humor, faith, love, patience, etc. These are the things that help you cope in situations and able to set these guidelines for yourself. Lastly, determine if your current life and where you want to go are sustainable. This doesn't mean that stress in life isn't real and that you need to build a life with no stress, but can you continue your current routine, your commitments, habits, obligations, responsibilities that you have today indefinitely? Is your life sustainable, or will you wind up in trouble down the road? If so, maybe some changes need to be made. A lot of us don't have boundaries, and we do feel unhappy. So this brings up the question of the pursuit of happiness, another hot topic. People are always looking for things that make them happy. We hear a lot about do whatever makes you happy or live in the moment. But should this really be the goal for us? There is short-term happiness and long-term, and we often search for what makes us happy in the moment. We have expectations for ourselves, and we think that will make us happy, like going to a party when really we should go home and rest due to a stressful week. We need to turn our focus more onto a long-term contentment. A Harvard study was done over a course of 75 years, and it looked at longevity. It looked at 268 males in 1938, followed them throughout 75 years, and those who were still alive in the end attributed to being happy and still having that longevity due to social connection, trustworthy friends, having family around them. Unhappiness was linked to loneliness and health problems. 40% of happiness is related to a choice and a practice, not life's circumstances. To succeed in that lifelong contentment, we need to make the decisions in what to fill our lives with, not let those things make the decision for us. So if we're trying to look at more of a long-term goal versus a short-term goal, we want to think about habits. Because habits are part of a routine where you get a reward, and then it's this cycle that keeps on continuing, and you're really rewiring your brain to create a healthier habit for yourself the more times you do it. Listed here are some actual real-life tips that you can take with you to build those healthy, happy habits. So you want to start small. You don't need to incorporate a lot of habits at once. try once a week or once a month, and find the ones that might be the most important to you and start with those. Some ideas are to prioritize. If you're constantly saying yes to something that you don't even want to do, is that something that you should continue doing? Try to divide your day into smaller blocks. It makes it less overwhelming and easier to really set apart what is family time, what's work time, what's social time, etc. Be a good example for your coworkers and for your kids. This holds you accountable to make sure that you're doing the right thing because people are watching you. We often say we don't have time for ourselves. We don't have time to exercise. But if we build those things into our schedule and learn to say no to things that maybe we shouldn't prioritize, then we can build self-care into our schedule. Communicate your feelings. We mentioned before that many people keep negative feelings inside, which can continue to affect your health. Communicate these feelings to your supervisors, your family, or even professionals if needed. Let go of perfectionism. This is the big one. You might have been listening to this webinar saying, yes, this is the key to how I'm going to balance my whole life. But things come up and it won't always go as planned. You won't have 100% balance. So you need to let go of that fact that your life will go perfectly. Once you let go of that, then you're more understanding of yourself and others. Practice mindfulness or meditate. This is where you're really reflecting on the needs of yourself or just taking a mental break. Those healthy boundaries we talked about, build those personal, family, and work rules and follow them. Make weekends and vacations work free. And as you're doing this, like I said, it will start to rewire your brain with new habits. Positivity is not always a natural thing. This is something that we have to rewire into our brain as well. So keep telling yourself that you're able to do this and that you're going to be in more control of how you react to situations versus not being able to control the things that come into your life. In the bigger picture, determining where we want to focus our life, that's really that long-term contentment that also gives us purpose in life. If we're devoting our whole life and a lot of our time to something, we want to make sure it has purpose and it's something that we want to do. So thinking about determining where our focus in life is, you can take part in the Life in Balance activity. What this activity encourages you to do is to really evaluate certain areas of your life and draw a dot corresponding to your answer. So 0 would be least satisfied and 10 is most satisfied. And once you've completed this, you can draw a line between each dot and see where you're more satisfied in areas and where you're least satisfied in other areas. Then you can determine whether you want to put less time into something or more time into something else. Thank you for listening to this webinar. I hope you enjoyed learning how to create more of a life balance with all the aspects of life that we have going on. Remember, life will never be perfect, but we can do our best to focus on the things that are most positive in our lives and that have the most meaning. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at healthydirections@hne.com. Thank you. Have a great day.